Are you considering whether or not to do a DPF delete or deal with the DPF cleaning and all the other stuff that go along with it? Well, I drove a deleted truck for over 4 years. And on this channel, I teach new truck drivers as well as owner operators how to succeed in trucking. Now, if you're not a truck driver, don't worry. You can grab a lot from this video because in this video, I'm going to talk about DPF and EGR delete pros and cons. So stick around. Now, I have to say this for CYA reasons. I am not advocating deleting anything that you own. I'm simply providing for your entertainment information to which you can make your own decisions. I've chosen 4 different pros, cons, as well as things to consider before deletion. Obviously, this is an abbreviated list, and there are more to consider. So if this is something that you're considering, which I cannot recommend or not recommend, you need to go ahead and do a little bit more research yourself. This is just going to give you some basics to consider and maybe help you to make a better decision while entertaining you. Number 1 is going to provide you more power. And, this is really going to be more necessary to larger trucks or if you're hauling loads around. And the reason why it provides more power, if we think about this, when you have that DPF system, on your vehicle, it is recirculating dirty air. And that recirculated dirty air goes back through, and just like anything in life, if you kind of provide crappy fuel, you're going to get crappy results. So once you do that delete, it actually cleans up everything, and now you're providing fresh air back through. So since you have more oxygen being pumped through the engine, it is actually going to provide you more power. So I know this is one that's overlooked, but it's something that a lot of truck drivers think about. I've got to have that. I got to have more power. I got to get to the top of the hill as fast as I can. Now, I don't recommend driving like that, which we're going to go directly into number 2, which it's going to be more fuel efficient. And think about exactly what I just said about number 1. It's more fuel efficient because you have cleaner air going through. And it's just a logic thing. The cleaner something is, the more efficient it's going to work. Now, of course, this isn't going to work on a brand spanking new engine. Engines that are brand new, they have a break-in period. So for that first year, roughly, at least for semis, that first year, you don't get as good a fuel mileage as everybody would like, especially with fuel prices the way they are. But fear not, because over time that does get a little bit better. And in a deleted truck, it's going to be way better. I mean, it is legitimately not unrealistic to get 10 plus miles to the gallon. I've even heard of 12 to 14. The engine that I ran was a 2250 Cummins, and it ran like a top. I bought my truck. It had 453,000 miles on it. It was not deleted prior, and it was getting pretty poor fuel mileage. And I do believe that it sat idle and ran a lot. It had high idle hours on it compared to the mileage that was on the truck. So unfortunately, I do think that truck did a lot of idling. And if you do a lot of idling with the DPF system that's still intact, it does a lot of wear and tear and damage to that engine, therefore reducing their efficiency, poor output. So just naturally, when you do a delete, you're actually going to get much, much better fuel mileage. And going directly into number 3, which I already mentioned, it's going to be less wear and tear. And less wear and tear means less downtime. If you're using your vehicle, for work, which obviously trucking, that's kind of the nature of the job, it's going to be a lot less downtime, which means you're going to be on the road, keeping the wheels turning, so that way you keep on earning. And that's the goal. That's the name of the game. But you're going to have that less wear and tear on it. I don't know how long you've been a truck driver, but, hands that have been around for a long time, some of the earlier versions, they were deleting those engines. I'm sorry, not deleting. They were rebuilding those engines after 200 to 400,000 miles. That's how new the technology was. That's how little we knew about that technology. And unfortunately, they just didn't quite have it figured out yet. Now, some of the newer engines, they're running much better. They're running more efficiently. They're running a little bit hotter. And if they're running a little bit hotter, just more heat means more wear and tear, which means that they're not going to quite last as long as, some of the old Caterpillar engines, which in my opinion were the best, but that's for another video. The less wear and tear means a lot of things. It means you get to keep more of your money, and that less downtime allows you to earn more money. So it's a win kind of all the way around. And the last one, and this one's a little bit obvious, but it's still worth mentioning. You're going to have less diesel engine DPF problems. Who'd have thunk it? Working on the DPF system is extremely expensive. There's a ton of sensors that goes into it, and it causes a lot of damage just all the way around. So naturally, taking that DPF system out of play, well, you don't have to repair or maintain any of those parts. So obviously going back to, keeping more money in your pocket keeps you making more money, keeps your truck turning, and keeps you earning more. So, that last one, number 4, I get it. It's very simple, very obvious to see, but it's still worth a mention because I don't know if it's still this way, but, if you were running a Detroit engine, that one box, $17,000 in some of the shops out there, some more, some less. So I think that's roughly about an average. That's huge. That's a huge bill. And that could put a lot of people out of business if you're ill prepared. So yes, I get it. It was blatantly obvious, but $17,000 is still worth a mention. So going directly into the cons, the first con is, it's going to be pretty obvious. The initial cost. A lot of these deletes, at least the good deletes, there are good ones, there are bad ones, there's the best and everything in between, because everybody seems to be an expert these days. But the initial cost, it's going to cost you, $2,000-$3,000. And depending, some of these shops will actually charge even more. And you don't know what you're getting, unfortunately. So make sure you do that research, you look into it, and you get a nice, reputable shop, which I'll go into that in a little bit. But make sure that you're getting a reputable delete, but there is an initial investment that is involved. So it is going to cost you at least a couple $1,000s for a good one. You can find other people that are doing way less. I mean, I've heard as low as like $500, but considering that that's my livelihood, there's no way that I'm going to trust, something that cheap. So the initial cost is the first con. Now, the second con, and this one's actually a big one, there's going to be less shops that you can go to when you're broken down or you need maintenance over the road. And, that's, it's one that can go easily overlooked. Once I was all the way in the Northeast, I was all the way up in Maine, and I started to have an issue with my truck. And unfortunately, I was calling around. I don't even know how many shops I called. I think it was on number 7 or 8. They told me to go ahead and bring it in. I brought it in and I got there, which was it wasn't too bad. It's like 20 minutes out of the way. But when I got there, then they denied me. And I was truthful and straightforward with them. I was like, look, I've got a deleted truck. I don't want to waste anybody's time here. And a lot of them told me no. This one said yes. And then when I got there, I got a different story. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. I will go into, that is part of the things to consider whenever you're looking into delete. There's a lot less shops out there that you can deal with, for your regular breakdowns and your regular maintenance. And it can be a nuisance depending on where you're at and where you're running. So definitely something to consider there. Number 3, and this one's a big one, there's a chance that you're going to get some serious fines, because if you're caught, if you're turned in, then that's a really, really big ticket. And obviously we're not even going to go down there. It doesn't need to be said, but it can cause you a lot of headache and drain a lot of your money and time. So that it's definitely not something to be overlooked. It's something that you have to take into consideration when you're considering something like this. There's some serious cons on this list. Those fines, well, those are certainly worth a mention here. And the last one, and this may be something that you haven't considered, you can't exactly just take your truck whenever you're ready to upgrade or sell or whatever it is that you decide to do, get a new one. You can't exactly just take your truck down to the dealership and trade it in, because a lot of those guys can't accept deleted trucks. And you need to be honest with them, because guess what? They're going to figure it out. I mean, they take these things and they put them through at least a decent check process, but any mechanic that's half worth his salt, which I would say that the majority of them are at the larger dealerships, well, they're going to figure it out very, very quickly. And I would even go as far as to say they probably look for it. I know a lot of truck drivers that, drive deleted trucks, and because it's just way more efficient. But, and I just went through this, you're pretty much always going to be looking at selling the truck outright yourself. Now, something else, I know that's a con, but it might even add a little bit more value whenever you go to sell it. But you didn't hear that from me. Now, 4 things that you should consider prior to doing a deletion. Number 1 on the list is find the right shop. And I know I touched on this a little bit earlier, but this cannot be overstated. Finding the right shop that does it properly, and everything that's involved. There's mechanic work involved, as well as there's digital work involved. The digital work is more so the issue, not necessarily on the mechanic side. The mechanic side is very straightforward, very, very simple. But the digital side, going in and messing with the different specs and knowing what to change, what not to change, that's where the real art comes in. So definitely look into, the good reviewed, highly spoken about shops. And I would even go as far as to say, find someone that has a deleted truck that is running it and ask them where they went. And I would ask multiple sources. I mean, this is a really, really big decision. It's going to affect you throughout the entirety of owning that truck. So, don't take this lightly. I would find multiple sources. I wouldn't just go one, but I have a feeling you're going to see one name continually popping up, which I have mentioned on this channel, just not in this video. And, that's definitely where you want to go. So research your shops. Number 2 is going to be find the right mechanic for you. And that's going to be related to where you spend a lot of your downtime. And for most of us, that would be, in our home area. And I would drive 2, 3, 4 hours for the right mechanic. You want to have the right mechanic working on your stuff. And this is just good practice in general, but finding the right mechanic that'll work on your truck in a deleted fashion, and he needs to be aware of that. If that happens to be the person that does the delete, you're in great shape. Now, if it doesn't, then you just need to be aware when they start hooking up to that computer, because you don't want to hook up to the computer. Sometimes computers can do automatic updates. And if you update your profile, so to speak, of your truck, it's gonna mess up the delete. You're gonna have to go back to wherever you had it done and redo it. So, finding the right mechanic is super important. I think it's important regardless. You want to have that, utility in your belt, but it's even more so important when you're thinking about doing, a DPF delete. Now, number 3, this is going to pertain to the drivers that kind of run the same lanes. Drivers that run the same lanes, which I'm an advocate for. However, that's not always, you just can't always make that happen. Some can, but not everyone can run those same lanes all the time, 100% of the time. But the majority of routes, you want to find mechanics that will work on things at the major points. Like, for example, one of my biggest lanes to run, being out of Houston and running for Landstar, was running out of Houston up to Seattle, and then either Washington or Portland, kind of northern Oregon, straight back. I ran that a lot, especially after I, kind of in the last year of me being a truck driver. Ran that a lot, made a ton of money going in and made decent money coming back. It averaged out very nicely. I enjoyed the ride. I loved, going through Moab and, and running that route, running those areas during the winter or the summer. I didn't care. But I ran that a lot, and I had a guy that I could go see in Oregon. Now, I'm not going to name any names. I'm not going to put any names in the comments of this video for obvious reasons, but I did have a guy in Oregon that could do it, or that could work on my truck if need be, if the need arose. But thankfully I didn't have to use him very much. So, that's the benefit of having a deleted truck. And number 4, I will say this: increase your mechanic skills. Now, you do not need to be the best mechanic in the world, but you need to be able to turn a wrench. And, for me, my dad can fix anything. If there's an engine or a motor on it, he can fix it. I was not past that gene or, the smarts. Obviously he studied for a long time to be able to do all of that, but that didn't interest me as a child. Unfortunately, I wish it had. It would have helped me throughout my trucking career. But, I stayed up all night one night in Phoenix, Arizona during the dead middle of the summer, replacing some fuel lines. And, was it misery? Yes. But I saved a lot of money and I saved a lot of downtime. I was able to get out of there 2 days earlier than the shops could even have a look at it. So if you can learn to do the simple things, if you can learn, what things happen a lot to truck drivers, then you can ask. A great place to be is a forum that's full of truck drivers, and they'd be more than glad to help you out. That's why they're on the forums, at least the ones that know what's going on. I often reverted to Roz's forum, and there were a lot of people in there that were highly educated in the area of engines and trucks in general, and they could generally point you in the right direction. Even oftentimes just a simple Google search will give you enough to, at least somewhat or possibly diagnose what's going on, that rather than just taking it immediately to the shop and spending way too much money. Oftentimes a lot of the problems were very simple fixes. And if you can do that work yourself, you're not afraid to turn a wrench. You're not afraid to get out there and get dirty and climb all over that engine and truck. Well, you're going to keep a lot more money in your pocket. And it really, like whenever I would finish a major repair, what I would consider a major repair, which really wasn't, but it made me feel really good. So you kind of get that dopamine hit too. So anyway, if you found value in the video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe, ring that notification bell so you know when the next video is coming out. But as always, stay driven.